Climate change. Is it real? Some would claim an emphatic no. Others would claim an emphatic yes. Yet the people fighting about it are the ones rarely experiencing the consequences of it. People on the ground, caught in flooding in western India or extreme heat in Texas, don't have time to argue about such trivial matters. Whether the scientific phenomenon is real or not, when an extreme weather event strikes, it is a privilege to be able to sit in an air-conditioned room and whine one way or the other. At that point, it's not about the changing weather, or the cataclysms that have or will occur. It's about politics and identity. And this is what occurred to me back in the spring as I was watching the Apple TV series Extrapolations. I didn't think much of it beyond climate propaganda initially, because it wasn't a well-written or groundbreaking show. I looked it up, and while the predictions are accurate, it is also a drama, and dramas tend to dramatize things, right? But then came June, and this particular picture of New York at the beginning of the month. Now that doesn't seem too damning. California had similar scenes to this back in 2020. But the timing of it was a bit spooky to say the least. And of course, since then, we've had the record-breaking heat in Texas and hurricanes developing in June, all very similar to things described in the show. Extrapolations, though a series of predictions about the future of our species, is much more than that. It is not about what could potentially happen, whether we will have to eat nothing but kelp, or if every summer we'll have record-breaking heat and wildfires and hurricanes. It's not even about climate change exactly. It is about loss. An immeasurable and impossible to handle loss. And it is across all aspects and facets of life. It is also a story of our karma as a species, but not the way that we like to think of it. Karma is not a punishment for mistakes we've made, but an opportunity for growth using past events as a catalyst. Karma is obviously a much more complicated thing, but for the sake of this discussion, we're going to keep it simple. Karma is simple action and result, cause and effect. It is easy to look at our world and say that we deserve everything that is about to happen, that it is our karma in the traditional understanding as a punishment for our actions, but that is deeply self-destructive and the coward's way out. Yes, we are responsible for the choices we have made as a species, but it is much more important to rectify the mistakes than to waste time pointing fingers. What Extrapolations misses is the opportunity of climate change, not the one that Nick Bilton sees in business, but the opportunity for all humans to work together to create a better world. Does any of that make sense? Let me explain further as we dive deep into Apple TV's Extrapolations. For a little background, Extrapolations is a sort of anthology series that follows several characters over a period of time, from 2037 to 2070. Some stories are one-offs, and others have characters show up in one or more episodes. The villain of the series, Nick Bilton, plays a connecting thread between everything as he is indirectly and directly responsible for climate change. The series starts with Rebecca Shearer, a pregnant woman working in a forest fire until she goes into labor and is rushed to the hospital. She delivers her baby early from the lack of oxygen, and he's born with thermal cardiomyopathy, also known as summer heart. From here we watch the boy, Ezra, grow into a man, and see both how his condition and the changing climate impact his life. Ezra's condition makes him sensitive to extreme heat days and other kinds of stress.
In addition to heat and air quality, emotional stress has been known to trigger cardiac events related to summer heart.
Does he understand he could die from a sunny day? Well, I haven't quite found the words for that.
He appears in the first, second, and sixth episodes, each time worse than before. Ezra's story is that of the coming generation, the generation that will be born after the one that is currently being born. If the naming standard sticks, they would be known as Generation Beta. From here forward, we see Ezra's mother handling species extinction as she works for Menagerie 2100. She's a single mom by episode 2, having lost her husband to a typhoon in the Philippines. Rebecca's story is the most painful as her son is terminally ill, and early on we see her lose her mother to cancer and her husband to climate change. Also, she works with dying animals. She catalogs their behavior by talking to them, and many know that they are the last of their kind. In episode 3, we see a rabbi in Miami trying desperately to hold on to his synagogue building from being destroyed as the city goes underwater, but it's out of his hands in the end, as a massive hurricane destroys everything anyway. In episode 4, a young man becomes an eco-terrorist as his stepmother convinces him to participate in an illegal geoengineering scheme to cool the planet by spraying chemicals into the atmosphere. The next episode, episode 5, is unique because it actually looks at poor people in India and how the changing climate impacts them, from war to nocturnal living, to the lack of clean air, to the rise of synthetic food because agriculture has been severely impacted by the shift in the rains. This episode is the best of the series because these are the people who are really impacted by climate change. Every aspect of their lives is changed, but they never complain or whine about it. They organize a resistance and work to solve their own problems. And their stakes are much higher than just losing buildings or animals. In the next episode, we see Ezra return, now a worker in the gig economy as a kind of actor hired by individuals to play people that they have lost in their lives, a mother hiring a son, or a woman named Natasha hiring a father for her daughter. We see Ezra losing his memory from a lifetime of stress from Summer Heart, despite having had his Summer Heart fixed. He, like most people now, stores his memories in the cloud, and he is desperate to hold on to the memories of his dead wife. But the cost of cooling server farms is too much, and his work just doesn't pay enough. Ezra isn't just losing the memories of his family or his wife, it seems as though he has lost his ability to process grief and move on. In episode 7, a woman holding a New Year's Eve party for her friends is devastated when her husband announces that he is leaving her in the morning to be digitized by LifePause, a company that is helping the rich escape into a better future. And why wouldn't he? The year is 2069, and there is no more wind, no more sun, no more wilderness, and most food is made of kelp. Finally, in the last episode, we see Nick Bilton held to account for having impeded action on stopping climate change as well as profiting from it. He is formally charged at The Hague with ecocide, essentially willfully destroying the environment and world for profit. The case is initially dismissed, but more damning evidence comes out when it is shown that he possessed a device for removing carbon from the atmosphere for years and only chose to use it during his trial. He created it from a patent he stole from a young entrepreneur, along with her daughter Decima, as the device was a part of her inheritance. When Decima finds out about what he had done, she goes to the lead prosecutor at the ICC and turns him in. The series ends with the device being used to continually remove carbon from the atmosphere and cool the planet. In each episode, we see how climate change will cost us something, but most of all, it will cost us our children and grandchildren. They are destined to have a worse life than we did. All of us right now, over the age of 10, will likely not experience the worst of what climate change has to bring. I know a girl who's 3 years old right now, and she'll be in her 50s by 2070. So she will live through the coming ravages and the point at which everyone has no food but kelp. It's terrible because she's a picky eater right now. She will be around the same age as Sylvie in episode 7, the wife whose husband tries to leave her. Sylvie's character is a trooper to say the least, but having to use 6 months of carbon credits for roasted vegetables is heartbreaking. I'm not ashamed to admit that though I try to eat healthy and take care of myself, I ordered a pizza after watching this episode. The loss of bees as pollinators will lead to the loss of most of our food chain. Perhaps hydroponics, like indoor farming, could survive without bees, but I can't say for certain as I don't know enough on the subject. Along with food, we will lose species. Tigers, whales, and many more. It's interesting that we see fake flowers in episode 7 when most of the food is gone because the flowers and the pollinators are gone, and stuffed animals at the end of episode 2 when mass extinctions are happening.
The African elephant went extinct in 2040. The Tapanuli orangutan went extinct in 2045.
There will be more and more need for imagination and simulation as wilderness decays and dies. The loss of nature, wilderness, flowers, animals, and the food chain isn't just about a loss of those things. It's also about the loss of fundamental aspects of our humanity. We don't like to think of ourselves as a part of nature, but we are. Death and grieving, building relationships, experiencing love in a meaningful way, these are vestiges of our natural selves. But in the future, people cannot simply mourn the loss of family members or partners and move on. They hire someone to replace them. Maybe because the loss is so great they can't face it. Even physical touch is gone. Hugging is no longer normal in 2069, and even other forms of physical intimacy are contactless.
I'm aware I'm being serviced. You miss the discovery of another person, an authentic connection. But that's so rare. Maybe transactional's the best we can hope for.
Intimacy lacks real intimacy, emotional, physical, and otherwise. And it's difficult not to see the loss of nature as tied into the loss of this humanity. In the end, to survive, Ezra gives up all of his memories. When the server farm is wiped out by a tsunami, they are pretty much gone forever anyway. And though initially he had asked his neighbor to find the memories of his wife at the very least, when he does, Ezra can't afford to buy them back, so the neighbor sells them to a company selling a product. Another loss of humanity, as precious memories, like your wife telling you that she's pregnant, just becomes another marketing tool. Throughout the series, we see the loss of everything from water in the Middle East, family members such as Ezra's father, cities like Miami, and crops across the globe. As the natural world around us breaks down, we see people becoming more panicked, like this protester in the first episode, and the eco-terrorists in episode 4. We see relationships break apart, like Natasha's husband in episode 6, and he's replaced by Ezra. We lose lives as people choose to digitize themselves into the cloud and store themselves away for the future. We lose our collective and personal memories as animals die and server farms are destroyed from heat and tsunamis. It's easy to become incensed and depressed at some unstoppable future, like Alana in episode 3, but I think climate change is a bit more complicated than that. Many critics didn't like the series because there was no clear blame towards any group of people or institution other than the company Alpha. In this, the clear villain is capitalism gone wild, but nothing else. And the thing is, from a storytelling perspective, it would be difficult to blame everyone. Like, who isn't at fault? Even in reality, in a particular piece of legislation, it's easy to blame the government or lobbyists. In an oil spill, you can blame the company. But it's hard to blame anyone specific here. Climate change isn't like burglary. There isn't a black and white victim and villain. How do you hold any one person or people responsible for something so nebulous? At the end of the series, the Hague prosecutor blames humanity at large, and most people these days would be inclined to agree with her. Across the political spectrum, everyone would agree that whether it is overpopulation or humans in general, we have only ourselves to blame for any sort of cataclysm. In reality, it makes more sense to look at the systems that we live in as the problem, and it makes more sense to look at the very idea of modernity. As Nick Bilton says, it all really started around the time of the Industrial Revolution. That's when carbon emissions began going up, but also when people moved from rural country living into large cities, technology became more important and human populations took off. The term modernity encompasses systems of governance, laws, urban living, capitalism, consumer habits, environmental conservation, including things like land and water use, the importance of technology, entertainment, and just about everything you could think about when it comes to the way that industrialized Western societies live every day. You could also argue that climate change and modernity are a kind of karma for living the way that we do. It's easy to be callous and hateful like Nick.
If I am guilty here today, then I am only guilty of winning a game started generations ago. And if I am guilty here today, then so are your parents and their parents, and all the way back to the first tree felled to make way for man.
But truly, if we don't have compassion for ourselves, who will? We made a series of decisions in the interest of survival without full awareness of the consequences in the past. We are being made to account for them, but it's not a punishment nor a transaction. It's just karma. Now, karma isn't what most people think it is, but for the sake of argument, I'll stick with a simple explanation. It's simple action and reaction, as Neil describes here.
War was quick, man, but it left a mark, you know? I've got all these skills and I can do these things, and I'm not happy about it. The way I see it is, I've got to balance out my acts. For every evil action, some good administered as well. I saved your life, so that was 1 life saved for 3 lives gone. That means I have to save 2 more lives just to cancel out the violence tonight.
But you can see it as a cost and a transaction, or as a process. In Hinduism, it's often colloquially used as a way of judging one's actions. Ultimately, it just boils down to, you did something, and the result is karma. But it's also an opportunity. As my high school art teacher once said, we cannot paint on a white canvas. We need a base of color. And karma provides a kind of base for us in our lives. It's a series of patterns and problems we experience, and we will keep experiencing until we really deal with them. We as humans tend to perform the same actions over and over again. It's why we as a species are pattern-based. We look for patterns, we act in patterns, hence why those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. It develops in our lives, like for Neil becoming a trained killer in the war. But he never complains about how he became that in the war. It's just who he is, and he's trying to live his best life in a difficult world, trying to keep the scales balanced. If you believe that everything happening is a punishment, that God is sending pestilence and famine or disease as punishment for something, then you are Alana from episode 3. She is a young Jewish girl who turns her father in for bribing city officials in order to preserve her family's synagogue. She is deeply distraught by her father's actions between his wealth, choosing his mistress over his wife, and the bribery. She feels she must act to somehow abate God's wrath. She begs her rabbi for answers. Why is this happening? But in the end, this isn't about God. It's between us and us. It's hard to blame anyone or anything for climate change because we are destroying ourselves. If nature is a part of us, and modernity is destroying nature, then in effect, we are self-harming.
The world made you sick. Because we made the world sick.
Though most people don't see it that way because they see nature as being separate from us. It's just another resource, a means to earn more money. By destroying it, we can recreate it in a simulator and make even more money. This pattern of behavior is ultimately what gets Nick Bilton imprisoned. But a lot of people think this way, that life is nothing more than a series of transactions. Our situation is around modernity and nature, and it's simple. We have turned our back on our fundamental ancient selves, and to save ourselves and the planet, we need to figure out how to integrate this new version of ourselves, society post-industrial revolution, with our natural selves from thousands of years ago. Remember, it's about the actions we take and what happens afterwards.
It will only change if we do. If we stop lying about the world. If we stop expecting the ones who come after us to fix it, because we did not.
We need to find a way to stop thinking only in transactional terms. And make no mistake, this is not just an ill of business, but of governance and leadership and even in personal relationships. It is so common to simply treat people and relationships as disposable. It is so common to be without empathy that we just expect it now. The lesson of karma and extrapolations is the need to get back in touch with our humanity. And yes, humanity can be cruel and evil, but the fundamental underpinning of humanity is flexibility, especially of emotions. It is the ability to be good. Without it, we will keep living this cycle over and over again, the same way personal karma works. If we don't learn to see ourselves as a part of nature and figure out how to integrate nature in modernity, we will die. Again, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. That is karma. In many ways, that process has already begun. People are a lot more aware now of the problems of modernity and our disconnection from our natural selves. But the real villain in all of this is apathy. Because let's be real, if you talk to a climate change denier about how the modern world is destroying nature, they will agree with you. They may not see oil use as an issue, and they may think that the ocean's rising isn't a problem, but they will look at nature when they walk out into the woods and admit that things have changed for the worse. No one can deny that. The reason apathy is the real villain is because it allows us to give up. It hates the modern world. It believes that there's a finite number of resources and too many people. It's callousness, hatred of others, and hatred of the self as a result. It's closed-mindedness. It's guilt, climate hysteria, and diets that lack nutrition as a means of trying to reduce the carbon footprint. Ironically, both climate change deniers and activists engage in these processes, whether they are crying for Mother Nature or ticked off about the way things used to be. It's not going back and fixing our karma. It's not about addressing the things we did that we can fix. Because if we connect back into nature, we can see that nature is abundant, it's powerful, and it doesn't throw in the towel and resign itself to fate when things get hard. If we were humans grounded in nature, we would be the same way. If 2020 has proved anything, it's that the natural world is way more resilient than we have ever allowed ourselves to believe. And it's so easy to hate everything as it is right now. It's so easy to be mad about the world, but we never condemn technology, modern homes, or clothing. We want a clean, neat enemy, such as population sizes, systems, and leaders of governance and business, political parties, or movements. There's also this idea that a human desire for comfort and stable living is responsible for the world we find ourselves in. But even with these villains, there is no clear solution or satisfying story ending. It's so much easier to see humanity as a project that must be restarted because we are too far gone in evil and corruption to ever come back and actually deal with our problems.
What bothers me is wanting comfort and ease and then being outraged by its real cost. You burn coal for a few hundred years to keep yourself warm. Makes you feel like you defeated winter. And one day, you wake up nice and toasty, only to realize you've developed lung cancer from inhaling the smoke from burning all the coal.
And yet you keep burning coal.
Because the most powerful fantasy is that there is no cost to our comfort. Life is a transaction, Mother. That is its most meaningful measurement.
It's so easy to see everyone as responsible and no one at the same time. It's so easy to believe that there is no real solution. If it will all end anyway in an apocalypse, or we are meant to suffer, if we are failures as a society, then we are not responsible. We are just broken, flawed humans, and it's not our fault that we are this way. It's not our fault that our systems of business and governance are corrupt. Apathy and disconnection are a fantastic means of abandoning responsibility. We can coast by without the pressure of having to do anything. But here's the thing. We didn't get ourselves into this mess for the sake of ruining the planet. And frankly, this modern world isn't all that it's cracked up to be. Yes, all of our pleasures are met, and things are easier than ever, but it goes against our natural needs, like the hoarder impulse of our hunter-gatherer selves, the need for community and connection that is destroyed by work from home, the physical need for exercise that is difficult to manage in our sedentary lives. These are the parts of ourselves that are natural, that we ignore and dismiss. So it's okay to see that the modern world isn't perfect. But being fair, it does have some good things. For example, modern technology has given us better, more durable clothing, greater lifespans, the ability to care for the old and the sick, specialized tools to solve problems that our ancestors ancestors couldn't even dream about solving, among other things. Getting our hands dirty was what brought us to modern medicine and saving tons of lives and helping people as a whole have a better quality of life. We have created a stable world that is far less prone to the kind of anarchy that humanity has grown up through. We are free in our speech, in our work, in our education, our manner of dress, things that were historically limited by nature's limits. But that doesn't mean we can sit on our hands. We may have solved a lot of problems by heating up the temperature of the earth, but we can still reverse course. It is possible. The first step is to stop punishing ourselves and look at everything from a more neutral and holistic place. The technology that we developed that is heating up the planet can cool it back down, just so long as everyone's on the same page about the subject. The technology is not the problem and neither are we. It's the way that we think about everything, without balance. That's the real problem. The transactional nature of the world these days reduces us to robots, workers with labor, skills, and bodies to be traded. But our ancestors knew that there was so much more to life than that. To see the world right now as a kind of karma to be worked through, something to rectify, is a much more productive way to cope with these differences. It's too late to go back to a nomadic living or even a purely rural life, no matter what the anarcho-primitivists say. So how do we process this situation and move forward? There are people already doing this work. For example, on the documentary on Netflix, Kiss the Ground, they talk about this. Changing farming practices and improving food quality by removing pesticides. Things that help nature, but also improve human gut health. And that movie highlights all of the solutions possible before we even worry about getting off of fossil fuels. Things that are easy and beneficial for everyone. Also, I love Kozetsat's videos. They make complicated aspects of humanity more accessible, and they prove that we can not only get past the problems of our time, but use them to build a better world. Our systems and institutions have the capacity to destroy us as much as they do to save us. Business can be an engine of innovation and ideas, not just a way to make endless money. Government can be a tool for protecting the masses and maintaining functional systems of society. The real problem with modernity is that it is a restart for human minds and bodies that aren't trained for it. The solution is to look back at our past selves and take care of ourselves in the natural world accordingly. Ancient humans didn't feel guilty or bad about being here or making an impact on the environment. They thought about how to care for future generations and themselves as best as they could. The biggest key is to believe that it's even possible. Climate change is ultimately a conversation between us and ourselves, because each human is a part of a greater universe, and the greater universe resides deep within us as we are made from the same building blocks as the natural world. And we have dealt with self-destructive events in the past and survived. War, genocide, the atomic bomb, invasions, environmentally destructive events like oil spills. We come back stronger from each one, and we learn. And we grow from each event. Each crisis gives us the tools to deal with the next one, and we keep pushing through. The end of Extrapolations is satisfying because there was a clear villain who was put in jail and climate change was in the process of being stopped. But it didn't really talk about how we would change human behavior or the systems that created it, because business alone is not the only problem. It was just a solid ending in the context of a TV show. Real life is never so simple. Because how do you talk about how humans are the solution to the problem we created? Ironically, by using the business world's idea that everything is an opportunity against them, by seeing opportunities for more than just money. Rather than feeling guilty about the Anthropocene, we can see it as an opportunity to take responsibility of the home that nourished us for so many years. It's not even possible to fully discuss every option that is available to humanity to build a more cohesive world, because we really do need to see climate change as more than just a fight for nature, or even just our own survival. In reality, it's about building a more cohesive world that takes all facets of human needs into account, not just economic that comes from systems of business or spiritual that comes from nature. We need both, and we can't see them as separate. Everything is connected. The enemy here is our attitude, and it's a problem every single person has. Without the clear belief that the world is split in two, or that we are guilty somehow, imagine what humanity could accomplish. Climate change is our karma. It's our opportunity to take our natural selves into account and create a better world for all coming humans. But until we forgive and love ourselves, that will never happen. When we heal the world, we heal ourselves. But first we have to see it that way. Thank you so much for watching. So what do you think? Should we be worried about climate change? Are we hurtling towards our doom? Or will we be fine? Also, let me know if maybe you can see how you might have something in common with the people from the other side of the aisle. We all want a better world. We just don't necessarily agree with the how do we do it part of it. Anyways, thank you for watching. Bye!